Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Season 4, our season 4 premiere. And what a guest I have. His name is Ron Fassler. He's a Broadway historian and an author as well, writing two great books, The Show Goes On and Up in the Cheat Seats. Now, man, I'm really excited about this season. We've got a lot of great guests lined up, and we have a retooled theme song thanks to Peter Galisi. I'm really excited about this. Really excited for you guys to hear it and to hear the episode. Well, let's get the show on the road.
These are the performers that I know. These are the performers that I know. These are the performers that I know. These are the performers that I know.
All right, everybody, here we go. This is the Performers I Know, the season 4 premiere, episode 40. That's right. The episode is the same as my age. Yeah, I'm not a young man anymore. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go get my arthritis medication. Now, this week, I am super excited about this guest. He is a absolute connoisseur, a historian of sorts of Broadway. As Nathan Lane said of his Up in the Cheap Seats, it's an utterly charming and entertaining memoir, well worth the price of admission. And as Swoosie Quirts said, it's a gorgeous, brilliant book to be cherished. And I'm sure this man should be cherished as well. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest this week is author and Broadway historian, and he actually did some acting too, Mr. Ron Fassler. Sir, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for that intro. That's joining Swoosie Kurtz and Nathan Lane and you. That's good company.
Yeah, me and Nathan Lane and Mark Hamill and Swoosie Kurtz, we got together and we all thought that you were quite swell. Anyway, so once upon a time on the Book of Faces, I would see Ron in the various Broadway groups from time to time, posting about a lot of great things that went on in Broadway. Because as for those of you who don't know, Ron has gone to see Broadway shows since he was 12 years old, I believe it was.
Yeah, my first Broadway show was 10 and a half, but I've been going to the theater steadily for the last 55 years. I've been going since I was 12 years old.
Well, there you go. That is a half century of
Yeah,
Broadway.
with my paper route money. They don't even give little boys paper routes anymore. But that's how I financed my expeditions from Long Island into Manhattan every week. My first book, Up in the Cheap Seats, is the story of my going to see Broadway shows every week over a 4-year period between the ages of 12 and 16. I saw 200 Broadway shows,
You
all
see,
at an average ticket price of about $3.
you see, folks, once upon a time,
Yes,
Broadway tickets weren't insanely expensive.
it was available to everybody who wanted to go.
Yes. Well, I guess my first question, Ron, as I like to ask all of my guests, well, I might have to tailor this question slightly differently because I know you've done some acting, but what got you bitten in general by theater? What made you want to become such a big Broadway connoisseur, historian, seer of over 200 shows?
As a little boy, it was a movie that got me excited about the theater because I went to see The Music Man in 1962, the year it came out. I was only 5 years old, and my mom and dad took me to see it at Radio City Music Hall, which used to only play movies. And it was a 6,000 seat theater, still is, just doesn't play movies anymore. And to see The Music Man on that big screen, I just fell for musicals and for Robert Preston in particular as the Music Man. And I just wanted to be Robert Preston. So 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, I would read the newspaper and the theater section of the New York Times and the New York Post and all the regular newspapers I looked at as a kid. And I would look for articles about Robert Preston. So obviously, if I was that kid today, I'd be searching the internet, but it's the same thing. I was just interested in this guy. I thought he just captivated me. And so at 10 and a half years old, my aunt, my lovely Aunt Helen, knew how much Robert Preston meant to me. So she bought me a ticket to see a Broadway show that he was appearing in 1967. It was I Do, a two-character musical that starred him and Mary Martin. So I got to see my first Broadway show that starred Peter Pan and the Music Man. You can only imagine. I was over the moon. And that's when I was bitten by the bug, and I always wanted to be an actor. And I worked steadily as an actor for 30 years. I lived in Los Angeles a great deal of that time, working in film and television. And it was only 10 years ago, since I moved back to New York, that I decided to devote myself to writing about the theater as opposed to acting in it or acting in film and television. And now I'm an author, and the show goes on. My second book is ostensibly why I'm on your podcast today, to talk about that.
Yes. The first show I ever saw was Phantom of the Opera at the Majestic Theater. My whole family went, and I forgot to take my glasses. So all I saw were blurry shapes on stage. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, from up in the cheap seats, there was one show I went to see, and I went, I can't see anything. And I realized I had to go to the eye doctor, and then I've been wearing glasses ever since. So I feel your pain.
And that show was
Oh,
the
that
movie.
show, no, I really do remember that show. It was called Conduct Unbecoming. It was a
Oh,
mystery. And I just didn't know
the only mystery for Ron was why can't I see
what do it. I can't, what's going on? But yes, I mean, I've just had this incredible interest in theater. I've acted in many plays, and I've done off-Broadway and regional theater, and I've understudied on Broadway. I've actually, out of all the things I've ever done as an actor, and I've done cartoon, and I've done commercials, and I've done every movies and theater, television. I've done everything you could do as an actor, except I still have not appeared on a Broadway stage. Never say never. Could
Mm-hmm.
happen. But I'm pretty much through auditioning, so it would have to happen because somebody would probably have to invite me. I don't want to really do it anymore. It doesn't hold the allure it once did. And I've honestly found over these past years, since I've begun writing and written 2 books, that this is my life, is writing about the theater. And I'm also a theater critic, and I write reviews every week on off-Broadway and Broadway.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you mentioned the show goes on, and right now in my hand, I have the book here in my
It's in
hand.
my hands too. It's in my hand too.
It's in my and I have never devoured a book in my life as much as I did this book. I started reading it and I just could not put it down. All of these different stories. Now, did you come upon these stories via seeing things happen, or was it like a combination of seeing things and secondhand information?
Well, the show goes on. Subtitle is Broadway Hirings, Firings, and Replacements. It is a book. It's the first book of its kind that is sort of a history of how actors replace other actors, be it after the big star leaves and the show wants to keep going. Who replaces Michael Crawford in Phantom of the Opera, right? Who replaces Carol Channing in Hello, Dolly? Also, it tells great stories about understudies and standbys, and the stories in this book, some of them are so heroic. I mean, I love actors. I am an actor. I speak their language. So I spoke to 100 people for this book and got their personal stories, some of which I didn't know. Others I do know. Some I saw myself because I went to the theater and saw some of these great replacements. And also because I've just been collecting them over the years. If you tell me a great story today about some terrific replacement you saw, I'll remember that. It won't go out of my head. I mean, forget about, what I had for lunch yesterday. I mean, I can't remember that, but the great stories will always be stuff that sticks. And so when I sat down to write this book, they just poured out of me. And I did a lot of research. I mean, I spent really hours and hours here in Manhattan at the Lincoln Center Library for the Performing Arts, pouring through old newspaper articles and photographs and just getting all the ducks in a row so that when I interviewed people, I could ask intelligent questions.
Let me get this straight, Mr. Fassler. You want to see a recording of Via Galactica?
Well, I don't need a recording. I saw the original Via Galactica. I still
Wow.
remember it. For the uninitiated in the audience, Via Galactica was a Broadway musical that ran one weekend, and it was about outer space. It was about an interplanetary garbage man, played by Raul Julia. And in order to show weightlessness in space, which you really can't do without hanging people from wires all night long, they had trampolines on the stage, and everybody just bounced around a lot.
For,
I'm not
for those
joking. You
for those
wonder
of
why
you,
it ran a week.
I was going to say, for those of you younger theater people, I just want to let you know he's not joking. This is a
No,
thing that actually happened.
no, and Via Galactica was its second title. It opened what was then called the Eurus Theater. It's now called the Gershwin, but originally it was called the Eurus, named for the builder of the building. And it was going to be the first tenant, so there was a lot of interest in seeing the first new Broadway theater in decades. And the title of the musical at that point was Up, and they realized the marquee would read Up Eurus.
Oops.
Up Eurus. Yeah, yeah,
Or,
it didn't sound good, so they
or
changed it.
people would be like, "Up, what's up?" Like, I don't know what's up with you.
No, it didn't work. Via Galactica was a title that went down in infamy. It's on the wall of Joe Allen, the famous wall of shame of shows that closed quickly.
You know, a question that I've always wanted to ask, like veterans of the Broadway scene, people who have seen like everything under the sun, like, is you know, you hear like the horror stories about things like Moose Murders and Dude, Pirate Queen, Carrie, Dance of the Vampires, things like that. And it's like I always wonder if what it was like to actually see these shows rather than hear about them in like, oh, did you hear about Moose Murders? That was the worst show on Broadway. It was is there kind of like a select group of people that can say that they've seen shows like that bad on Broadway?
Well, back when theater tickets weren't that expensive, I can tell you that I received a phone call one night. This is like 1983, and a friend of mine said, "Ron, you have got to get down to the Eugene O'Neill Theater and see this show called Moose Murders. You have to see it to believe it. It will not be around very long. I'm not even sure it's going to make it to opening night." And sure enough, he was right. But at the time, I didn't have $5 or $6. Really, I was really pinching my pennies, trying to struggle as a young actor in New York, paying my rent. And I didn't go down to see it. Now, of course, I kicked myself. But there are certain shows you're sitting at and you say, my God, I'm witnessing something like the Titanic. I mean, this is going to go down as one of the great bombs. I mean, I've seen those shows, some of the ones you named, and nobody sets out to make a bad show. Everybody thinks they're doing something good, and then things go terribly wrong. I mean, sometimes the actors are truly trapped. Sometimes they try and get out. They leave. After all, the original star of Moose Murders smelled a stinker, and she left after one performance. It was the great Eve Arden, the great comedian. She was trying to make a Broadway comeback after 35 years, and she was in her 70s. I mean, how she was talked into Moose Murders, I mean, I just don't know, but she didn't last more than one performance.
Hmm.
And they actually got somebody to replace her. They got Holland Taylor, who, is a marvelous actress. And
Right.
Holland Taylor, I actually talk about it in The Show Goes On. People have said to her over the years, "Why did you do Moose Murders?" She goes, "Because I was starving to death." She goes, "I couldn't pay my bill at Joe Allen." She goes, "Moose Murders got me out of debt." For the 4 weeks she worked on it.
I mean, that's as good enough reason as anything.
Listen, actors got to live.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of anything right now. I mean, the closest that I can think of something like that bad, I mean, well, that's a subjective term, of course, would be like Tammy Faye.
Yeah, Tammy Faye was a kind of a disaster. I mean, it lost a fortune, and it was not good. I saw it, and it really had no business being on Broadway, and really not in the Palace Theater. It's a 1,600 seat theater. It played a little theater in London for 3 weeks, and it was sold out. And people thought, well, let's just move it to Broadway and put it in a 1,600 seat theater. I mean, it was not good producing. It's a shame. Again, no one sets out to create a bomb.
Now, as you mentioned before, you've done acting in the past, and it says here, I'm looking, and it appears that you understudied for Kevin Bacon a couple of times. That must have been
I've understudied Kevin Bacon twice, and it's not because we look alike, because we don't. Um, right place, right time. I was also understudying other people in the show, so Kevin's parts kind of got lumped in. But yeah, within like a 2 year period, I understudied Kevin twice. I also understudied Sean Penn, Chris Sarandon, Peter Riegert, Val Kilmer. Yeah, understudies. I understand. I speak that language too. And so I love the understudy stories that are in my book. Again, some of them are absolutely outrageous. You read the book, you know. I mean, it's a page turner. I mean, you just can't believe what you're reading at times. How people were able to do the impossible. That's why I love actors.
I mean, some of these stories, you look at them and you just go, wow, like
Well,
to be a fly on the wall
well, shall
for
I shall I shall I tell one of them? Shall I tell one of them for your listeners?
yeah, give us a little tidbit, give us a little
So
taste.
one of my favorite stories in the book has to do with a time when Richard Burton, at the height of his fame, he had just married Elizabeth Taylor. This is 1964, decided to do Hamlet on Broadway. And you know, Richard Burton was a great Shakespearean actor in his native UK. And he came to town. It was a massive hit. I mean, maybe not so much critically, but you could not get a ticket. And the crowds outside the theater, it was absolute mayhem. And he, of course, like every actor, had an understudy, but the understudy had no hopes of going on. Because even though Richard Burton was a tremendous carouser and partier and drinker, he never missed. He was just one of those guys that he was always there when the curtain rose. But one day, this understudy, an actor named Robert Burr, who was playing a smaller part in the show, he was playing Bernardo, he got a call. Hey, you're on for Richard Burton today. He's got a tonsil that's ruptured and he is not going to be able to do today or tomorrow. So you're doing the Wednesday matinee in the evening. And Robert Burr was like, okay, cool. I can do it. I can do it. I know the part. And he went up and he did it. And he did it really well. And I have a wonderful story. I actually interviewed his daughter, and his daughter said, I can't believe you're calling to talk about my dad when he did Hamlet, because I'll never forget my mother showing up at school. And I thought, oh my God, what's happened? She goes, no, honey, it's wonderful. Come on. I'm pulling you out of school today. Daddy's playing Hamlet on Broadway. And he did the show. That's not the end of the story. About 2 weeks later, he gets a call from Joseph Papp, who founded the Public Theater and at that time was still quite a name to be reckoned with. And he said, "Are you Robert Burr?" And Burr said, "Yes." He said, "Listen, I'm in a jam. I opened Hamlet in Central Park last night." And Burr said, "Yes, of course. I know. We all know uh, that the Central Park Delacorte Theater, Free Shakespeare in the Park, was doing a competing Hamlet." And Pap said to Burr, "You're not going to believe this, but our Hamlet cannot go on. He has completely lost his voice, and the understudy doesn't know the part yet. He's not up to speed. If you can get permission from your producers, can you come play Hamlet tonight?" Now think about this. This actor, Robert Burr, is going to drop everything, run over to Central Park, and do Hamlet with an entire company he's never met. He's going to do a different translation, and I don't mean translation, adaptation, because no two Hamlets are ever performed the same. His cues are going to be different. The costumes, the staging. He was in a modern dress Hamlet where everybody wore business suits and things like that. The Hamlet in Central Park was, Denmark in 1560. I mean, it was insane. He didn't know his Ophelia. He didn't know his mother, Gertrude. And he showed up at the theater right after the matinee. And he got there like 5 o'clock and got to run through a little bit of it. And that night went on his Hamlet. And he did it for 2 solid weeks until the actor got his voice back. And when the actor called Joe Papp and said, "I'm ready to return," Joe Papp said, "Stay home. We like this guy. We like this guy."
Wah, wah.
But truly incredible that he could have done that. I just find it extraordinary. And I pulled up some great information about it, interviews with him at the time about it, stories that his daughter tells. And it's just one of my favorite stories in the book.
You know, I've I've often heard a urban legend of Broadway. I don't know how true this is. That when Richard Burton was in Camelot, the inside joke was they made the song "I Wonder What the King Is Drinking Tonight."
Well, I mean, it was just a well-known fact. He drank continually. I mean, he was performing under the influence, but it took a lot of alcohol to get him drunk. You build up a resistance and a tolerance.
Right.
But I remember someone telling me a story, an actor who was with Burton in the 1950s when he wasn't really famous yet, but he was really making his way up, and he was doing a production of Coriolanus. And he said we would do the show, he'd be drinking during the show, he'd drink after the show, and then we'd go pub hopping until because they would keep closing and he'd find ones that could stay open later and later. He'd finally get home maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock, and then show up for rehearsal at 10 o'clock the next day. And one day he was rehearsing, and in the middle of rehearsal, he just fell forward on his face. And they called the doctors, and the doctor, said to him, "Listen, if you keep up like this, you're never going to make it to age 35." Well, he kept up like that, and he only made it to 58. Richard Burton died at 58, and if you see photographs of him, he looked like a 70 or an 80-year-old man. I mean, it took such a toll on him. It's terrible.
The stories in particular, I believe, when he was in Equus, I was just reading that a little while ago.
Yeah, I cover that in the book when he took over in Equus on
Yeah.
Broadway.
A lot of these, the stories about Equus, because that's one of those shows where it's like, if I had a time machine, I wish I can go
Yeah.
back to see that, because it just
Yeah.
seems like a very interesting group of guys who were playing that role on stage.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it 4 times, and I really don't return to shows that often. But I saw Equus 4 times with 3 different actors, and it was also the physical production was stunning. It was really something else. It was a straight play that ran on Broadway for 3 years, which is pretty rare for a
To
straight play.
say that Anthony Hopkins, Richard Burton, Leonard Nimoy, and Anthony Perkins were in that show at one point or another, it's like,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Norman Bates and Spock.
Yeah, they got people who were quite famous, and they were all anxious to play the role. It's a terrific part.
Looking here at a Slab Boys at the Playhouse Theater, and it seems here it says, direct quote, "I hung backstage, never on stage, with Kevin Bacon, Brian Benben, Jackie Earl Haley, Val Kilmer, and Sean Penn." That is just like a who's who of
I understudied all 5 of them. I had to learn all their roles, and the play took place in Scotland, and I had to do Scottish accents and different ones because some were upper class, some were lower class. It was a lot of work, and I am very grateful I never had to go on.
Now, are there any shows playing right now where you look at it and you go, this is going to be a smash? Like you see all these different things like Boop, and speaking of Smash, the show Smash is coming up on Broadway, and the Jonathan Groff, Just in Time, and all these other different shows, Floyd Collins. What would you say you think will be something that is going to run on Broadway for a long time? Like if you had to take
Well, I'm not a great prognosticator. I mean, I was the one who said they're making a musical out of Little Orphan Annie. That's not going to last long. So I didn't figure that one out. And then sometimes I see something, I go, this is going to be the biggest hit I've ever seen, and it closes quickly. I was pleased. A show I saw last weekend, a brand new off-Broadway show called Liberation. I was writing my review just last night because it had to be in by 10 p.m. And I thought, wow, I'm really going out on a limb saying this play is so good it should actually move to Broadway. I hope I'm not like I look like an idiot and I'm the only person that liked it. And sure enough, it got just overwhelmingly positive reviews. So I was very pleased that I called that one. But in terms of your direct question, which one do I think has the best chance of becoming a big Broadway sensation? I really couldn't say. I really couldn't. I think they all have pluses and minuses. I will go so far as to say, when you mentioned Floyd Collins, that could very well be the best revival Tony. Come in late in the season and just grab it. It's a stunning piece of work. Have you ever seen Floyd Collins?
I not know.
It's a great score, and it's a very it's a fascinating show to watch because, well, your listeners, if you don't know, it's about a man trapped in a cave. It's the rescue of a man trapped in a cave.
You
And
know,
I think that's going to take the critics. I think it's going to be and I know nothing about it. I have no inside information. I'm just saying it's a feeling I have that the time might be right for that show again. It's being done at the Beaumont, which is a great space for it. Um, so we'll see. But best revival this year, you know, you've got Gypsy, which they got Sunset Boulevard. I mean, there's been some good stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what
you
happens.
know, you say you're not a good guesser of things. I should talk because I was convinced Swept Away was going to become a mega hit. Whoops.
Yeah, that I will tell you was not my feeling. I mean, I liked it, but when I walked out of the theater, I said, "Who is the audience for this show?" As a friend of mine said, it's the feel-good cannibal musical of the season.
I mean, I will say the people who loved the show supported it rabidly. I spoke to a lot of them, and they were like, "This is the best show ever." And apparently, unfortunately, people did not seem to agree because, well, now, I mean, as we're recording this, it's the 21st of February, and right around the corner is Dead Outlaw, which is going into the theater. So, there's, no chance for
Which I saw off Broadway and is a terrific show. Yeah. And
I
Operation Mincemeat, which is coming too. I saw that in London last year, and that's a wonderful show as well.
Well, the fact that its run has been extended by 4 weeks and it technically hasn't even opened yet should tell you all you need to know.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
as I look at the old clock on the wall, I see that we are starting to run a little bit out of time. But Ron, the last question that I have for you, um, I guess let me tailor this a little bit differently. For those are people who say like, "Hey, Ron, I want to really start getting into Broadway, really start getting into theater." What kind of advice would you give them, even the simplest piece of advice, to tailor and harness their love of theater?
Do you mean as actors or just as people who just want to be part of this world?
It could be anything, actors or just theater lovers in general.
Well, I mean, you need to support it. You need to go. And I know the Broadway prices are very high, but there are still ways around it. There are rushes, there are lotteries, there are discount codes, there are certainly benefits if you're under 30 years of age. You can get into these shows, or beg some family member who's got some money. The uncle say, "Hey, you really want to go see Sunset Boulevard? I think we'd have a good time going to that, Uncle Danny." I mean, that's what I did. I mean, you've got to just find your ways and read plays, read. I mean, people don't read anymore. Get your knowledge up and running. Read a book like mine, which is just 400 pages of incredibly entertaining theater stories. It will get your juices flowing. You may find a way creatively into this business from all different directions. Being a writer, being a critic, writing your own things, making your own little plays, putting them up. I mean, you can make a movie now on your phone and win awards at film festivals. The sky's the limit. There's really no end to what we can do creatively. But if you want to be in theater or a part of theater, you need to support it and you need to go. There's so much theater in this town, in New York City, or even on Long Island, or even in New Jersey. Do you know New Jersey has more theaters per capita than any state in America?
I've
It's a
done most
fact.
of my theater stuff lately in New Jersey, so
Well, there you go. There you go.
yeah.
But I love the theater. I've loved it my whole life. I feel very proud to be part of it as a theater critic, as an author, and even sometime actor. I like to refer to myself as a recovering actor.
It's funny you talk about Broadway prices. I was looking up the Glengarry Glen Ross prices, and
Yeah.
my God, I think I might have to take a second mortgage out, but that's neither here nor there. Well, anyway, folks, as the ending music, I want to thank my very special guest, Mr. Ron Fassler. Ron, thank you so much for joining us.
One last pitch, if you want to buy my book, just go to my website. You can just Google Ron Fassler and you'll find it, or The Show Goes On. Easy to find.
These are the performers that
Yes,
I know.
indeed. Two very excellent books. Well, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, this is Dane Ford Jones saying so long and thank you.